Everybody, welcome to What's Up Wednesday. This week, I want to talk about something that I don't think I've ever addressed before, and hopefully, it's not something that we have to deal with very often. But the topic of this week's What's Up Wednesday is what do you do when an OSHA inspector or a state program compliance officer shows up at your work location, at your job site, unannounced? What do you do? How do you handle that? And I don't know, how often we're training on this topic. I think companies probably generally have some kind of a protocol or kind of a procedure that you would follow. But I think, let's outline this a little bit. The very first thing to do is to remain calm. You don't want to get all excited. Oh, good to meet you. Shake their hand, invite them in, probably. You want to verify their credentials, so you want to see their identification. And then whatever your notification process is for company leadership, maybe if it's a job site level, the corporate safety director needs to be notified. Whatever that process looks like, you need to follow through that process. And then the next thing you want to do after you've kind of verified credentials, greeted them, generally speaking, I'd recommend that you take them into a conference room or someplace private, offer them something to drink, coffee, water, and request an opening conference. An opening conference, they're going to kind of outline your rights. They're going to outline the reason why they're there, the scope of their inspection. And the critical thing is you want to accompany them at all times while they're there. Maybe not if they go across the hall to the bathroom or something, but you don't want that OSHA inspector walking the site or doing anything unaccompanied. You also want to try to document everything that you see with photos, notes. And if they ask you questions, I think it's really important to answer those questions concisely and truthfully to the best of your knowledge. And secondly, and this is critical, don't volunteer information that they're not asking for. So, when it's a compliance inspection, they're there for a specific reason. Usually it might be a complaint. It might be an injury that occurred and you had to report that injury or accident to OSHA. It could be a scheduled inspection. There are different reasons. They could have been driving by and seen a hazard and decided that they're going to target that site for an inspection. So, request that opening conference, bring in the necessary management representatives, and that could be people who are there in person. You could also ask the inspector to give you a few minutes to try to coordinate some of the other leadership team from the company to bring them in via some kind of a video platform or even just a conference call of some kind. And like I said, when you get through the opening conference and the inspector outlines what they want to do, where they want to go, what they want to inspect, you want to accompany them on that inspection. It's really, really critical. And then document everything that they look at, any questions they ask, any observations they make. This is going to be really critical because you're potentially going to want to give all that information to your legal representation if and when you're cited by OSHA or Washington State, it would be the Department of Industries, and there are 22 state program states that have jurisdiction over the private sector. So depending on where you are, the jurisdiction may change. The next thing is that the inspector may request interviews of employees, and it's really important that employees are allowed to speak privately with that inspector. They can't be forced to do so, but it's always best really to do that. And it's really good that we instruct our workers to answer the questions honestly, but also let them know they're not required to give any kind of a signed statement. I think that's important. And then if the inspector points something out, if there's a minor violation identified, it's always a really good idea to do what you can to correct it immediately, whether there's somebody there who can correct the hazard, or you can jump on the radio and say, hey, Bill, or hey, Jane, I just noticed we got an issue down here with some housekeeping. Can you send somebody down to clean this up right away? Take care of it. Be very concise. Get on it. And I think it goes without being said, but compliance officers, inspectors, they come in different shapes and sizes when it comes to their personality. Some of them are more quiet and professional, others are challenging. And there's a spectrum from one end to the other. But it's really important not to argue with that inspector, not to get into any kind of emotional escalation with that inspector. Just remain professional, be as cooperative as you can, and and again, answer the questions to the information they're looking for, but don't volunteer or offer information that they're not asking for. And then the last thing is that after you've completed the opening conference, after they've done their walk or their inspection, ask for a closing conference. You want to kind of discuss their findings. You want to ask questions about potential violations, and you want to try to put an abatement process in place right away. So if they've identified specific observations of unsafe conditions or unsafe acts, you want to address those and document them very quickly. You want to build a case that you were very quick to respond and that all of the things that they pointed out you addressed on the spot and got those corrected. And you want to document all that as part of your case in case you have a hearing down the road. Now, some key tips are that if you wanted to, you could request a warrant. This isn't generally advised, and I would always recommend that somebody get legal counsel on this, but you can request a warrant and refuse to cooperate with them if you choose to do so. Again, not recommended because I would expect retaliation of a brutal nature when they get that warrant, they show back up. Don't hide anything, and do not provide any documents unless they're very specifically requested. So records, training records, policies, unless they ask for them, don't volunteer them. It's not necessary. Why overcomplicate things, right? And then I think the important thing, and this would be part of a policy or procedure with any company, is make sure you follow the notification process so that everybody understands what's going on. Hey, we have an inspector on site and we're having an OSHA inspection right now. Make sure legal counsel, whether internal or external, is alerted so that they're in the know early, and that way you can get ahead of this thing. And if issued a citation and you decide to contest the citation, you already have the wheels in motion, so to speak, to protect yourself. So those are kind of some rules of thumb around what to do if an OSHA inspector shows up. And I know from years of experience that approach tends to work really, really well. And the more cooperative you come across with that person, the more likely they are. Again, it depends on the inspector, it depends on their personality, but if you're cooperative and collaborative, they're more likely to be a little bit more lenient than if you're argumentative. They're going to hit you with everything they possibly can. So hopefully you find that helpful. We'll see you next Wednesday.